My name is Cindy Carpentieri, and I am interviewing Stephanie McClure for Georgia State University's Women's March Oral History Project. The date is March 2nd, 2019, and the interview is taking place at Georgia College in Milledgeville, Georgia. All right, let's get started.
Okay.
In what year and where were you born?
Kansas City, Missouri in 1976. Technically North Kansas City, but...
And can you tell me about your family's political leanings?
Growing up,
Mm-hmm.
My parents got divorced when I was in middle school. My dad was an electrician. He worked at Kansas City Power and Light, and then he worked for the Ford Motor Company for about 11 years before he passed. Growing up when my parents were still together, so that was like, I guess they got divorced. My sister Starla would remember exactly, but when I was 6th grade maybe. We were raised Baptist, very conservative. As the church was open, we were there. My mom really was the driver of the family politics, and she's, to this day, incredibly conservative. Very much. I was raised in a family where the people who protested in front of abortion clinics and got arrested were our heroes. I can still remember one of the guys who used to go to Kansas City Youth for Christ with us. His name was Brett Holder, and his mom got arrested one time. She was like who we admired, right? And so that was my background. And when my parents got divorced, and my dad, I don't think he was in the union when he was at Kansas City Power and Light, but he was in the union at Ford. And I don't know, looking back on it, if his politics were always different from my mom's, or if they became different by virtue of his union membership. My parents got divorced because my dad had problems with anger and violence, and so it was an abusive situation. And it was also fantastic because then I got to have a relationship with my dad once I was safe from him before he passed. And so it was really interesting. Oh God, when did he pass? 2006 or something? So again, Starla would know. She's the family historian. She's my younger sister. She has all the dates like locked in her brain, and she makes fun of me because I can't keep everything straight. I think I said that I went to the march in January 2016, which is not accurate. Dad's politics were more progressive, sort of union-based labor, right? And then related to abortion, we never really talked about it, but related to homosexuality. My uncle, my mom's younger brother, is gay. And this election, the election of Trump and Pence, was a pretty serious one for their relationship. And even actually for my uncle, like the night before election night, my mom was talking to my uncle, and he was in tears about her voting for Mike Pence, who believed in conversion therapy. And he's like, you're basically saying you don't think I should be who I am. And she didn't care because everything she does is based on abortion. So one of the things that was really interesting in the questions is, do you have a family history of activism? And my mom actually went to one of the original Marches for Life in D.C. So my politics has shifted quite dramatically from the politics of my youth over time. But what's interesting is talking to my mom about going to the march. She understood it in those terms.
So you did tell your mom that you went to the march?
Yeah, we talk a lot and fight. Or I argue with her, and she says, well, you're smarter than me, so I don't know, Stephanie. And I'm like, that means that you have to change your mind. But she doesn't care.
So when you were younger and your mom was politically active and very conservative, did you accompany her to any, activism or marches or anything like that when you were younger?
I don't remember that. I don't think so. I do remember it being a part of our life. She ran for the school board, and I can remember helping her canvass. And she used to canvass for Kit Bond, who I don't know if you know who he is. He's like a old school Missouri politician, super corrupt, massively alcoholic, and like notoriously, but again, he was a hero. When I was growing up, Kit Bond was one of the good guys, and of course, and so was Reagan, and so, and Mondale was the devil, and so a lot of this reconstructing that history and how Jimmy Carter, God, he was the worst, growing up, and now, I absolutely admire the man, so it's really interesting to kind of think through. It took a long time, and actually, I would say it took 2016 for me to fully process my transition from being anti-abortion to being pro-choice.
Really?
Even though I was 40 years old. I had become pro-choice in my politics, but not vocally in any way. The sign, that I carried for all lives to matter, Black lives must matter, that's the thing at the top of the list. That my attitudes towards race and racial inequality is really what drove my political transformation. And the anti-abortion stuff was so deeply ingrained in my socialization, even when I sort of realized it was wrong, I think, honestly, on that particular issue, I don't make anybody happy, having come from where I was and then to where I am. I can understand why, in my mom's mind, going to the March for Life is standing up for people who can't speak for themselves, which is also what motivates me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's her, well, I might disagree with it. She's not doing something that's purely motivated by selfishness.
Right, it's just
That
who
makes sense.
she thinks is...
Defines as a life, on some level, So I think that's something that sometimes is frustrating with progressive folks, who didn't come out of the same socialization that I did.
Yeah, you can see that from her point of view. It really helps you understand a little bit that her as a person versus her views.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to circle around before we start moving through the rest of the interview. You said that your dad was much more progressive. Were there political conversations when you were growing up? I mean, did your dad ever say, no, I don't agree with?
Nothing at all. That I can remember at all. And I'm not, like I said, I think I've perceived him as pretty apolitical when my parents were still together. The mom really drove the bus and sort of dictated what the family politics were. Okay. And I couldn't tell you if Dad agreed with her, disagreed, or just didn't care. Okay. So, that really, his union affiliation, right, connection with labor and kind of where not everybody in labor is progressive, but it's sort of like that's who they become coalition partners with, and so it pulls you, in that direction. Those were all when I was an adult, so I don't remember any childhood conversations with Dad about politics or seeing him and Mom talk about anything. Okay. Yeah.
That's interesting. And so you talked about, you said that really it was 2016 that you really started to process this, but when did you really start to move towards that? Like, when do you remember first thinking, oh...
It was totally college.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. Because I research college students, I know that the idea that college makes you liberal is not borne out by the literature. Actually, college polarizes you. It pushes people in either direction. But I showed up to campus. It's so embarrassing, but so fun. I mean, because that's why I do what I do, because I love college gave me myself, and the fact that I get to do this for other students, it's amazing. So it's embarrassing, and people are surprised, people who only know me as an adult. But when I went to college, my roommate, through roommate roulette, who I got to see at the March, which was amazing, she was a bio pre-med major from St. Louis, Missouri, like super sophisticated. I was from like small town Missouri, and she was raised in a Catholic family, but definitely lapsed Catholic, right, in terms of how we understand that. More Catholic in identity than in religious belief. But I came in college through the Josh McDowell socialization, right? They're not even invented a condom for your mind. Premarital sex is bad. Like, definitely anti-evolution. I had this book that we got from my church called Unlocking the Mysteries of Creation. And it's not just that I had the book and had gone to the workshop, but that I packed it with me to go to college. Like, I was prepared for battle as a holy warrior against the secular. I really was just as opinionated and loud as I am now, with totally opposite beliefs. So I made her cry, like, our first month living together, because I was debating with her about evolution versus, I mean, she's bio pre-med, right? So, like, science is her thing. And she told me years later, she, like, went to the library to try to find articles. God, I don't know why we became best friends. I do feel feelings about that, because she was such a gift to me. But, so that's really where I started. I came in, very solidly in this belief system. And then I think in trying to reconstruct it, because we do talk a lot about change models and like what does lead people to change, what they think. I found the Black Studies minor, and I can't always figure out exactly how I did that. And through that I found sociology, and through that I found my people. So that's, my kind of professional socialization. And then I also took a class it was a political science elective, and I think I thought it was on social policy, but the actual whole class was on welfare, the entire 16 weeks.
Wow.
And this professor, as I recall her, was very soft-spoken. We just read a lot, and I was always really a curious person. My mom even role modeled this for me, so it's where we fight a lot. I'm like, why are you acting like you're surprised? You taught me to read nonfiction and only nonfiction, and then I do, and it changes my mind, and you won't listen to me. I don't understand. It was through that semester, a lot of racialized welfare myths had been a part of my socialization through the 700 Club and Pat Robertson and like culture of poverty and all this stuff that I really, really thought were true. And then the data didn't support it, there was, and I think I feel like that was when the thing started to unlock, and I was like, that's not true, I wonder what else is it true,
and all of a sudden this whole world opens up to you.
Yeah.
You reference your profession, what do you do for a living?
I teach sociology here at the college. Yeah, so even my experience in the march is like massive metacognition, right? So I'm always looking, even while I was there, intimately, I'm still like thinking about what the 30,000-foot view was of what was going on.
Putting it into context and how did you bring that back to your students? Like, have you talked about it in class?
Not so much, yeah, that's a really interesting thing, even in the decision to march, and then when Sarah and I decided to get on the bus, I'd never done anything like that before. I'd never marched. I think I'm a more structural sociologist. I think I was pretty skeptical about marches as a thing.
Yeah.
I don't really think that's what changes things. So what's the point? It's just a bunch of people who feel good. And even in thinking about March for Life stuff that I'd seen, it felt like, pardon my language, but like self-righteous mental masturbation. Like, let's go get together with people who agree with us and feel like we're super awesome, And then, the material conditions of no one's lives are changed. So I had been massively a movement skeptic in terms of collective action until, so that's why I had never marched before, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. In our lifetime, we haven't seen it. We've seen I like the mental masturbation. Yeah. But that's I can understand how that was part of your experience. And so, what actually made you said you went with your friend Sarah?
Yeah. And you asked if I brought it back to my students, and I'm still struggling with that. I think the being publicly pro-choice is a big thing that has changed for me from 2016 to 2019. So it was like I was privately pro-choice for a really long time, but I generally tried to avoid the conversation. So you could safely assume that those beliefs lined up with, my other beliefs that you might have known about me, but it would better not to talk about it, because just people get real mad and people have these firmly held beliefs. It's better to avoid it. And through Pantsuit Nation, which is the Facebook group, I heard all these stories. That made me cry too. That was a massive motivator for me. First of all, because I'd always worked in racial inequality, but really not so much in gender. And so I'm an intersectional feminist, I think of myself. I'm in the tradition of Pat Hill Collins and bell hooks. That's where I got my knowledge of feminism, was through Black feminists. So I didn't come through the Susan B. Anthony kind of, right? So I didn't have to confess from the racial side of the, so I learned about them from bell hooks, right? Ain't I a Woman? So these women on Pantsuit Nation who, they're alive to be in the group, right? So it's not like such history a long time ago. They shared these stories about, sexism, institutionalized sexism, and overt sexism that was backed up by the institutions in terms of job opportunities and college programs. And even, I can remember one woman that stood out because I related to it so much, about women not being allowed to wear pants to high school. And then a woman had her period or something, and the only thing they had was a pair of pants. And she told the story about how she had to get a note from the principal because she knew there was that one high school coach who was going to give her shit about it. And so she had the note in her pocket. And I knew that coach, who was just a douche, right? To all the women, all the time, for no reason. And weirdly, in a pervy way, like it was flirting, right? But to sexual harassment, really. Yeah. We all had that coach in high school. We all had that guy who really, by virtue of his authority and his douchiness, just made you feel unsafe and uncomfortable sort of all the time.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah.
It was in, I mean, I read it.
We all
and
know that guy.
Yeah, you have an
totally.
image from your life. And it's like, that guy is everywhere. And I thought, geez, I think I maybe had taken for granted a lot of the products of women's lib, as the case may be, in my life course from 1976 on.
Yeah.
And I didn't really get the recency of that level of alienation and marginalization. And then, I'm sure you've read some of them, but the stories that people told about back alley abortions, about losing their mom because kid number 7 was coming, the family was broke. And I mean, you cried about it and you thought, why is no one talking about this? And what I wanted desperately was like a coffee table book of all of those stories to give to every member of my family. Like, I'm sorry, but this shit is complicated. I know you think you're right, but this shit is complicated. And these stories deserve to be heard. And I realized I needed to share them. But Pantsuit Nation was set up so that you really couldn't share posts outside of the group.
Right.
And of course you would want people's permission. And then there was this whole discussion afterwards of consent and like, did people agree? Sociologically, it's fascinating,
Yeah,
right?
It's an interesting perspective from that, yeah.
Yeah, but it, so I think that kind of pushed me. Prior to that, as an academic, as a professor, certainly at a teaching institution where college had transformed me, I had had what C. Wright Mills called this sort of professional distance. Like, I don't think my politics were a secret, but I didn't want to wear any party affiliation on my sleeve. I didn't want it to be available or known to my students, so I was never involved in local democratic politics, had no desire to be affiliated with the party, and then, you know, at no time, you know, let my students see that. And I got real convicted of that after November 2016.
What changed in your mind? Like, what were you?
You know, I said this to some students yesterday. I think, and I don't know what the right answer is. I'm not sitting comfortably in my new position, but I thought differently about it. I realized that the students I was trying to keep as my audience were basically straight white dudes. I didn't want to lose them by having them be like, oh, she's a Democrat, so screw her. You know, I'm not going to listen to anything she says. And in the meantime, I had all these other students who were not straight white dudes, who I wasn't letting them know that I was on their team.
Yeah.
So it was a choice I was making of who to make feel, I don't know, if safe is an oversimplification and a weasel word, it feels like, but something about like, who sees me as having their back?
Yeah.
And have I done enough for them? Because it is consequential. It is people's life chances and opportunities. It is whether they live or die, right? And so I felt real convicted by that I had, and I really felt righteous in it. That, I mean, I'm a professor, so I want to maintain my objectivity so that my student, you know, because that's my job. But then I had sort of abdicated my responsibilities as a citizen.
Yeah. When did you start seeing this?
It was really after Trump got elected.
Okay.
No, it was before that. That's true. So I had this group, Middle Georgia Progressive Women. We had started actually in September of let me get the dates right, 2016. And it came from a woman that I worked with on campus. She and I weirdly had parallel conversations with older black men who are involved in politics in Baldwin County. She with Greg Barnes and me with Floyd Griffin. And Floyd had said to me, we were talking about, he was running for office in 2016. And I don't remember who put us in touch with each other, but he said, I just don't think that middle-class white women are willing to be out as Democrats in Baldwin County because they feel like it'll marginalize them from their social networks. Because the hegemony in Baldwin County of if you're white, you're a Republican, if you're black, you're a Democrat. I mean, my friend Erin, her son Alan on the playground told a black friend, like, well, my family's Democrats. And he's like, you don't understand that. You have said that wrong. That can't be true because there are no white Democrats, And that's real. Yeah. And that's, sort of true in terms of like public face of the parties in Baldwin County. And I said to Floyd, I sent my kid to public school, so I'm already marginalized from my middle class networks. But I was convicted by the fact that he saw that. Yeah. Like, whatever my perception of it, however much I thought I was already alienated from that, like the Real Housewives of Baldwin County or whatever, that's not what he saw. Yeah. And so Erin had said the same thing to Greg. She's like, I want to do more, and this was prior to the presidential election. What can I do? Drive to the polls, whatever. And Greg had said to Erin, there needs to be evidence that there are progressive white women in
Yeah.
Baldwin County. Can you
Yeah.
find some? And so then she and I somehow met and shared these conversations. And we thought, well, we could probably come up with like 10, maybe 12. Right. Like we were counting our, what do you think? I don't know. I think she's still pretty pro-life, so she's probably not comfortable with being, like going through the list of our friends.
Okay, I was going to ask, how do you identify these people and how
Yes.
did you reach out?
So then we started a Facebook group and we invited the folks that we felt like we knew. And then we ended up with 350 members of the Middle Georgia Progressive Women. And then it was, and so this is to the march, I guess, because God, you're like, why is she talking about all these things and none of it's on the topic that this is on? But it is like, once we started to see that there were more of us, then you start to be more willing to be bold in a you don't have to have your people because you know they exist, right? It creates, and that's what marching does. That's what I figured out. It happened, and you're like, what? I hate everyone. I hate America. This is what we are. This is what we would do. You go to a march, you see it's not all of us, and you feel more like you can stay engaged.
Yeah, do you remember do you remember when you got to the march or when you saw, like, it sounds like you were surprised by the number of people who sort of came out of the woodwork once you said, hey, this is a thing.
Yeah.
You know, there are
Yeah.
Middle Georgia progressive women.
Right.
Like that feeling, did you have that feeling with the march too when you went? Were you surprised at how many people were at the march?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was overwhelming. It was like logistically and interpersonally and anxiety-wise overwhelming.
Yeah.
That was the sociology of it, because like phone signal sucked. I don't know. Were you there? Did you go?
I went to the one here.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like, so the DC one is on the TV and like all my friends know. And then weirdly, Georgia College had us do interviews about it, which I was like, I'm not affiliated with Georgia College in my participation in this march, right? I was afraid I was going to get in trouble with the governor or something. But Georgia College University Communications set up interviews for Sarah Dowd and I about like professors going to the march. And I'm like, I don't think you guys understand how this is supposed to work. But so we were very clear that we were speaking only for ourselves and not the institution. But the institution set it up, and there was some rumblings on campus of like, well, I don't think that's right. Like, we didn't do it. That was not us, right? That was. I could name a name of who set up that interview.
And so much for you trying to maintain this
yes, it was
persona
really
of like,
weird.
oh no, I'm
Yeah,
sort of middle of the road. Or you know.
So if I hadn't already made that choice, it was being made for me.
Exactly,
Right, in doing
exactly.
that change. And so when we went to Macon to get on the bus, and Sarah and I were terrified. And there was lots of discussion. I don't know if you remember, and you know, being a sociologist, lots of it was around class privilege and race privilege, and you know, these middle class white women are marching for the first time, so they're spending like $800 on their March gear. And I bought a new pair of boots. I did, no lie, because I wanted them to be warm and comfortable, and I was afraid it was going to be freezing, right? And so then they had all these rules about the bags, and they had to be clear, and they had to, all this stuff. So I like got they're like the stadium bags that they have for the SEC now, so you can't bring liquor inside the thing, which of course you can still, because we are innovative in response to restriction. So like I'm packing all this up, and my husband, like we had snacks and we had all this stuff, and he's like, you know that you're going to DC, right? It's not the Hunger Games. Like they have restaurants there. It was so funny. I ate all the food that I took. I needed all. Nothing was open when you got there. So we get there, we go on the bus, you know, and relinquishing the logistics to the bus was amazing to be able to do that. Like you just got on, they drove you. When we were on the bus, one of the things that was super fun is, you know, we're going overnight and nobody could sleep, of course. We were all too excited. And we would stop to go to the bathroom, and I think maybe if it was a bus of 50 people, there were like 5 guys, right? So it's 45 women. You'd go in line, get in line to go to the bathroom. We're going to be here forever. We'll never get to DC if we wait for every other. So like the second stop, we all started using the men's room. And I remember this trucker like in the middle of the night coming out like, what is happening? The women are taking over. And it was awesome.
Because the power of you understand like suddenly
that collective
45 against 1.
Good luck, man. I don't care. Do what you got to do with your penis, but I gotta pee. I'm not like your brother, just trying to go to the bathroom, you know?
So tell me about how, so you got involved with this group in September, and you went, so how did the idea to go to the march go, and how did you and Sarah find each other and decide to go, and why did you choose that? Can you tell me about that process?
Yeah. So we started the group in September, and then we all wore our pantsuits on election day, and we took a picture downtown if all of us were with her, you know? So that was really my first, I'm doing it. I'm gonna let people know who I'm voting for. I'm not keeping it a secret. Again, nobody was surprised. Let's be clear, it's not like I was subtle, but still, for me, it was a big deal.
Oh, sure.
And I had been equivocal, Hillary, and I haven't been able to disentangle the degree to which that was part of the sort of sexist, patriarchal hit job that's been persistent for however many years she's been in public life, and to what degree it was about discipline policy differences.
Right.
I can't quite figure that out in my brain, but it was there, right? It was I'm more with the people who were with her, sort of like I've always been a fan of Chicago Cubs fans, not so much the Cubs themselves, but I love Chicago Cubs fans. They're like so badass, you know?
Yeah.
And so I loved the women who were with Hillary, even if I didn't feel like I could be with her with the same level of enthusiasm. I was so impressed by them. I was like, these women are badass, you know? And so I wanted to be on their team. And a good pantsuit is really phenomenal. Let's be real. It makes you feel like you can kick some ass.
Do anything in a
So we did that, and we had what America had, many of us had, right? The election night happens, and you wake up in the morning, and you feel hollowed out inside. And you don't know what to do with it, right? Yeah. And so, you know, through that group, there was, there's a bus going from Macon, there's a bus going from Atlanta, there's a bus going from, who's going to go, are we going to go? And Sarah and I kept messaging, you know, she's one of my best friends. She's a professor of criminal justice, and I was like, I think we should do it. I don't want to go. I have to pee all the time. That's like one of my 40-year-old realities. Is like my bladder is not my friend. It's a rhetorical question. Do you need to go to the bathroom? The answer is always yes.
Yeah.
Like, something like being at a march was just logistically not good for me. Yeah. I was like, do they have a stadium pal for women? It turns out they don't. That's a whole other conversation. That was part of our preparation and discussion, right?
Oh, sure.
Snacks, bathrooms,
logistics,
all of that stuff, right? And so Sarah and I were super anxious, I have to say. We went and got on the bus, and we were like, and then we're on the bus, and it was so funny. There was these two sisters, and one of them was a nurse, and I think the other one was a teacher, and they were sitting across from us, and there was all these discussions of stuff that, in retrospect, looks really stupid. But we were really nervous about violence, that there might be an attack or something, right? And so then the nurse, people were telling us, it was all on the internet, and then you're doing it because you don't know, you've never been on a march before, to write your name and your cell phone number on your arm in permanent marker in case you were knocked out and they needed to know, right, if they were taking you to the hospital. And then I swear to God, the nurse said, you should do it on this arm and this leg in case you lose a limb.
It's so something a nurse would say.
It's so dramatic, but she was like exactly the same. And then what Sarah and I figured out about each other, which was like news to us, is that my response to anxiety is to game out the worst case scenario. To like, okay, so if the worst thing were to happen, here is how we would respond to that. Yes, I think it's a perfectly rational strategy, but it was terrifying to her. I was freaking her out. So then she's eating pop brownies, like trying to get all shit up because I'm like stressing her out. And then I'm stressed because she's eating pop brownies, and that's not my jam. So that was like the experience on the bus, right? So overnight. So then the bus gets there later than they told us they would, which is fine. Probably all the bathroom stops, right, made it more difficult. And then the traffic was crazy. So where they parked the buses, we get there. March has already started. The speeches, everybody's texting me like, oh, Ashley Judd is a man. I'm like, I'm not even there yet. Leave me alone, right? And so we get there, we get off the bus, and we had gotten our Metro cards in advance. I mean, we had it down. Metro was swamped. I mean, the waits were like 45 minutes or more to get a train. So everybody's like, just walk, go this way. So we're all moving in a mass. In what direction? I don't know. And then Sarah's had pop brownies, and then my friend Chelsea's brother was there, and they're all acting like I know where to go. Well, I have no sense of direction. And any sense of direction I did have has been abdicated since I've been married to my husband, who has an internalized map from the sky in said, which is gendered, but it's my life, okay? So I stopped learning how to get around places, which is not good. I lived in Chicago once. I was very good at getting around Chicago, but I didn't need it anymore. And then they're all looking to me like, Stephanie knows where she's going. I walk with confidence. This is a mistake. Everyone trusts me. It's not a good idea. So it took us forever to get there, and everybody's blowing up my phone like, oh, wow. And I'm like, leave me alone. I'm trying to get the map to work, and the signal was horrible, and we can't get there. And there were like 17 friends, former students and everyone who was there, and they were all trying to meet up, right? So, but it was massive, and they had blockades like, so you couldn't get there from here. It was like,
Yeah.
you may as well be in like Ethiopia for,
Yeah.
like, if you're on this side of the barricade and you're on this side of the barricade, we will never see each other.
Yeah.
So that was chaos, right? So I kept taking pictures, like, of us with our sign at a street corner so that the people who were trying to find us, so we could find each other.
Yeah.
But you really couldn't. And I'd been to DC. It's relatively logical, but with
Yeah.
the barriers and the crowds, logic was out the window.
Yeah, were you surrounded by people, or were you still on the fringes where you could have, like...
So we
space?
got kind of up to the fringe. Like, remember, we were sort of at the back of the Capitol, so the march would have been like down the hill in front, right, on the thing. And Sarah is diabetic, and she crashed. And so she was sweating, and her blood sugar was like, it's a number that a doctor would freak out. And I learned, in addition to the differences in anxiety, that as her friend, I kept saying, are you okay, are you okay? And she would say she was fine. And I should have said, you're not okay, sit down, eat something.
Yeah.
Been more forceful, but I was also stressed. So then I'm like, well, my friend's gonna die, so that'll be fun. Good times. We came to DC. We're not ever. So eventually, all the people who were following me quit following me because we had to stop to make sure she didn't die. So she had like, half of our snacks at that point. And we were trying to find my best friend who lives in Virginia. He's a medical doctor, and I'm like texting her Sarah's blood sugar number or is that right? Whatever the
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And she's like, oh my God, that's terrifying, right? So we get that done, and then we really have to go to the bathroom. And there were no bathrooms. There were bathrooms everywhere. There were porta potties. There was a funny thing, like the company that they were named was like, there was a funny joke, like with Trump's inauguration, that the guy who did the porta potties, they were like a kind of an insult. The name of it was an insult to Trump. Now I can't remember. They're all there.
I'm sure someone paid extra for that just because.
Yeah. Right. They were all chained up, and you couldn't get to them. So there were like an ocean of bathrooms, and none of them could be used, which was metaphorical for why we were marching in the first place, right? It felt really deep. So there was a very small number, but not nearly enough for the crowd size. So those were disgusting, almost immediately, right? And then there was lots of discussion afterwards that there was trash everywhere. There was nowhere to put trash.
Yeah.
Like, there was literally, like, they had not anticipated, and no one had, the number of people who would show up, and so the infrastructure couldn't support it, right?
Yeah.
And it's a great sociological example of culture versus structure, right? Oh, these women are so disrespectful. No, it's actually like, it's literally, I carried around trash for 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
Trying to find somewhere to put it that wasn't bad, right? And then
Right.
eventually it's all sweaty, and you have to do the next thing, and you're like, okay, there's trash everywhere, I'm adding to the trash. And then you feel the deep guilt that
sure.
the bear or whatever has like taught you to feel about that. But what
Yeah,
am I
but
gonna do?
you're coming to do a good thing, and you want to be...
The good person.
Yeah, and a positive example, and show that, yes, we can march and be respectful, and, no.
It's just not possible, yeah. So my experience of the march was not of anything like what people saw on TV.
Well, yeah, so did
It was very intimate.
And like your group, because you had some emergent issues in your particular group.
Right. So we barely made the march. I think I maybe heard 2 speeches.
Uh-huh.
And everyone's like, text again, and I'm like, leave me alone. But they were trying to be supportive, but I was like stressed. Oh, then we had to go to the bathroom. No bathroom. We walked for probably an hour and a half just trying to find somewhere to go to the bathroom. And we really reached a point where we thought, well, we're just going to have to go to the metro and go away from the march in order to find nothing was open. Everything was closed. And it felt on purpose, and maybe it wasn't.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a normal thing for after Inauguration Day. But it really felt like, a hostile environment. It was the Hunger Games. It felt like that. So then eventually there was a spot under an overpass where women had taken like a highway road sign and made a sort of half wall, and people were just peeing on the side of the highway. And we were taking turns holding the sign for each other, so you really didn't have privacy, and you're looking around like there's definitely a camera here somewhere, right? But it didn't matter. I had to pee. I'm not going to be able to do literally anything else until I go to the bathroom. And there's no stadium pal for women, so here it is.
And it's a basic need. You cannot focus on anything else. You're like, I really want to change the world, but first I gotta pee.
I've really got to go to the bathroom. So I had been right in anticipating that there would be issues related to that. So that was a huge part of our morning, right? And then we finally get to where we're at the march, and then by some miracle, my best friend Becky, we see each other. She's the only, there were probably, again, like 17, 20 people. Sarah's nieces and one of her sisters, I think, were there, never found each other, right? Tons of former students never found each other. Becky and I somehow there she is.
Yeah.
And so we got to like be together at the Women's March, which was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool. So it was incredible, but the thing was incredible had nothing to do with what was happening on the stage. Is
Like-
what I mean.
Yeah.
You know?
What was the most incredible part for you? Like what
It was the
thing?
size of the crowd.
Yeah.
There's so many of us.
Yeah.
And and everybody was so different. And a lot of the analysis afterwards was like, it's all white women. And I'm like, well, tyranny of demography, dude. There's a lot of us. Like, I don't know what
Yeah.
you want from me.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just white women. It felt like a lot of those critiques were making all of the women of color who were there invisible. Like,
Right.
on my bus, there were women of color. Everywhere I looked at that march, there were women of color. All over and you're sort of saying because there were so many white women that the women of color weren't there. Kind of
Right.
fuck you, you know? Like, I see that you're trying to do it from this like woke intersectional, I call it woke misogyny, right? Where you're sort of constantly attacking white women uniquely. And I think it's really just a way to attack women, but look cool while you do it,
Yeah.
right? Because I mean, it's white women and we know they're the worst, those basic bitches with their pumpkin spice lattes and their Ugg boots or whatever. And I'm like, that's fine. But you bitch all you want, okay? Just get the hell out of my way so I can get in the business of making the world better. But then, of course, convicted because 53% of white women did vote for Trump. And what the hell is up with that?
Yeah, but it's a lot easier to marginalize if you could just say, oh, these people, they're, this is an issue, they're focusing on this, and I feel like, yeah,
It was a vast
interesting.
oversimplification for sure,
Yeah.
and did violence to what I saw with my own eyes, which was that we were all there, and we might not all have agreed.
Yeah.
One of the things I told Sarah is we're not going to march against Trump, we're going to march for
Right.
what we believe, and that's why we had our signs.
Yeah.
That's why I loved it, because kindness is everything. That's really right down to it.
Yeah.
If I'm marching for anything, it is for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I want to circle back to something you said. You said you looked around, we were all so different.
Yeah.
And what do you mean by that? Like you
By
looked around-
race, by age, certainly visibly, as much as you can read this, right? By ethnic identity.
Mhm.
The people who came, the whole families came. There were lots of dads there with their kids,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was really cool. I mean, I know, I hate to see dads with their kids at a Klan rally. I don't think this is the same thing, but you know what I mean? Like, that's how they would interpret it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you're like brainwashing them into, well, I did March for Life, so what do you want from me?
Yeah.
Like, there were Girl Scout troops, which I just, go Girl Scouts, like really, it was amazing. Think about how awesome those women are that are in charge of those troops who said, this is what we're gonna do. And so it was super joyful.
Yeah.
And it didn't have anything to do with the star power on the stage or how good Madonna kicked somebody's ass. It had everything to do with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what,
We.
what were you, when you went there, what were you sort of expecting to get out of it versus what you saw? Was it, it sounds like it was unexpected.
To be able to be in the audience, hearing the speeches, and like the television cameras would show you Ashley Judd, and they would pan to the sea of faces, and I would be in the sea of faces, and I would be listening and clapping.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be in an audience.
Yeah.
Really, I
Uh-huh.
think. And that, there was maybe 20 minutes of the day where I was in it.
Yeah.
There was the walking, there was the peeing, there was the finding your friends, there was the listening, and then there was the just looking over. There was just a sea of people everywhere. And I thought the pink hats were kind of stupid, and somebody gave me one for free, and I was like, I don't know about that. It's too far, you're trying to get me to be too much of a joiner. I've been resisting. But it was cool.
Yeah.
Visually, it was cool. And then everybody's like, not all vaginas are pink. And I think, it's a metaphor. I think you're going a little
Yeah.
too far.
If you want to make sort of a brown one, it's fine.
I ain't mad at you, The whole point was that pink is for girls.
Mhm.
That pink is stigmatized. The feminine is stigmatized. The feminine is always stigmatized. That's the problem, with second wave feminism, is it made it okay for everybody to be like a man.
Yeah.
And it didn't do anything to deconstruct the stigma of the feminine. I like pink, screw you, right? And I can still be in charge.
Yeah, exactly.
And lipstick. I love my lipstick.
What about the side, sort of when you got there, and issues that you saw being represented? Like you mentioned, you wanted to march for something, not just against Trump. What did you see looking around you?
Oh gosh, so many, and they were so good. My favorite were definitely the snarky ones. I think the one, I'm sure in the project there's a lot of that, and that was the best part after the march, was like clicking through the slideshows of all the best signs and being, God, people are amazing, so funny and so good. And the ones of the little old ladies who were like, I'm 89 years old and I still gotta be marching for this shit. I love that. Was so good.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be resting. What is the matter?
Yeah. Backwards.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is what I've seen. I've seen a lot of older, angry white women. There's this one woman in our community, she comes to events a lot, and every time she asks a question of like anything, she's like, what the hell? I thought we had addressed this already. I don't understand. She's sweet and kind, is the most beautiful, but she's pissed, you know?
Yeah.
Like, seriously, people, get it together.
So, what about the people that you went up on the bus with? There were 50 people. Did you guys, it sounded like they were with you for a while and then everybody sort of
we all
dispersed?
dispersed, yeah.
Okay.
So there wasn't a ton of bonding there. I think there were some connections and a few Facebook friends and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But we were mainly kind of with the people we were with on
Yeah.
the bus.
Okay.
And then I will tell you, I had to restrain the kind of cheerleader in me. I wanted us to be doing bus things,
Yeah.
and because that's part of my personality,
Yeah.
to come up with chants and let's play our playlist and get fired up. And I had to be like, you don't need to be the boss of that. You know, you can like let that go and just be. So, but no one else did, you know, that's why I always end up doing it, because no one else is doing it.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in charge, but no, step up, people. I need
And
someone to be in
it makes it more
charge.
fun, but
It
some
does.
people don't necessarily want to do that.
Right,
Well-
and so I resisted that, and so there wasn't as much of that, yeah.
Did you tell your mom? You said you did
Yes.
tell your mom you were going.
Yes,
What about your dad? Like, what was the response of people when you told them you
he
were
was
going to the
already,
march?
he had already passed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he had passed about 8 years ago or
Okay.
so, yeah.
So what did your mom say and the
That's
people
where
back
she
at home?
she sort of understood from her perspective of marching for standing up for what you
Uh-huh.
believe. She was proud of me for it, you
Okay.
know, which I think was really interesting. We aren't close, we don't get along, but in that instance, that felt okay. You know, it was frustrating because literally she voted for,
Yeah.
right? And she'd made my uncle cry, and I just, the lack of empathy there, that like he's your brother and he's in tears
Yeah.
and he's kind of a bitch. He doesn't usually cry. Like,
Yeah.
what, doesn't this do something to you?
Yeah.
That was never gone. It was hard not to be frustrated, but there was like this tiny sliver of, it's cool that Mama's proud of me for doing this.
Yeah. So even
Yeah.
when because it's interesting that's how that's what you're taking away from that she was proud of you to go. But you guys didn't really talk about like the issues. It was more just focused on the activism, and she was.
Yeah, we
excited
do
about
more
that.
now.
Yeah.
I do every once in a while. I poke her. I mean,
Yeah.
she's a lot. I don't have a great relationship. I tell my students, what time is it? I just need to double check on the time.
Oh yeah. It is almost 9. It's 5 till 9.
okay,
So
we're
we're
good.
good. We're good. Yeah.
Well, my students and I talk about this all the time. Like, if you read something and it changes your mind, you think you could talk to people you love and they would also change their mind, because you just, like, it's right there in the word. You know, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, understand what,
yeah.
what, do you not, what is this? Do you speak English too? You know, and then so it gets exhausting, so you stop having those conversations.
Yeah.
But then, you know, it's people's lives, so it doesn't matter how tired you are. Go take a nap and try again,
Yeah.
you know? And so I really tried to do more of that with my mom,
Uh-huh.
to kind of push her on things. Something so stupid. I'm talking to her about, well, I call it my whiskey weight or my Trump weight, but since 2016, definitely I put on some pounds and I blame him. So it said something about that, and she's like, well, I survived Obama, so you have to survive Trump. And I said, what stressed you out about what Obama was doing? And she's like, oh, well, he wanted to redistribute all the wealth. This conversation with my mom was because on her limited income, she's retired, so she has a retirement and her Social Security. She wasn't able to afford to pay her bills. Like, she was calling me about getting on my phone plan so that she could afford. And I was like, how does cognitive dissonance not make your head explode?
Yeah.
Like, you literally they're not taking money from you. You don't have any money. I don't
Yeah.
understand. Like, what kind of, like, murder? And there's no, and so I called her on it. I was like, I can't, Mom. Just, you're a smart woman. I know you are. How can you not see? he wasn't going to take your money. It was so bizarre. So I do that, but then, I mean, if you heard that about somebody's mom, you would think, well, I think she's round the bend, man. Maybe it's not going to be real useful for you to talk to her.
Well, yeah, you realize that they're not going to change them. And that's, I think, one of the things that most of us have learned in the last few years is that logic doesn't always work.
Yeah.
And you can't, what seems obvious to you isn't necessarily,
Yeah.
like, I don't understand. Did your mom want to talk to you after, or did you talk to your mom after you got back from the march about, did she want to know what it was like? Did you guys sort of connect on that about
Not
your
really.
experience? Okay.
No. After the march was actually alienating. I think I got a little more isolated because there were so many critiques of the march.
Uh-huh.
And they were very progressive leftist critiques of like, here's why that was stupid and wrong and a total waste of time.
Talking about in the media or your personal connections?
Yeah, in the media, but then shared by
Uh-huh.
people in my Facebook network. Right after the march, it was like from both directions. I had women in my timeline who were pissed that that one women's group that is pro-life didn't get included.
Uh-huh.
And so they were posting about it and they were saying, look at this whole, sea of women marching to be able to kill their babies, right? And I'm like, murder. So I messaged off, not on the news feed, but in private messages, like, that is really hurtful. Like, I was there and you really, really think that of me, right?
Mm.
For some people it did make them pause, but for others it was like there was one friend. As part of the reason I became more vocally pro-choice, my sister is diabetic and another pregnancy would be an incredibly high-risk pregnancy for her. She's on birth control, right? And so she's doing what she's supposed to do, but birth control doesn't always work. And if that happened, none of your damn business, okay? That's between her and her husband and her kids, and they get to decide, and you are basically saying you think you get to decide whether or not my sister lives or dies. And I feel a little stabby about that, because she's like my favorite person, So, like, when I said that to a friend about, I explained my personal connection to this issue, she didn't care. It was still murder, and I was like, you know what? If that's how you feel about my sister, maybe we're not friends.
Yeah.
Like, if that can't touch you in any way, I just, you're not on my team. You're not safe.
Yeah.
So that was happening, but then there was also the white women who showed up and trashed the Capitol kind of thing from the left, and I was like, well, really, I can't win. You all hate me. And then I was like, screw it. I do what I want. You're not the boss of me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to decide for myself. But after the march was actually, that week and a half after was really sad. I was really sad.
Uh-huh. Just because you were trying to process this event and how you felt there versus what people were saying from the outside.
Yes.
How did you feel?
It felt so joyful to me.
Okay, I was
And
going
then
to
to
say,
see these responses was like,
so when you got back on the bus to come back, because you said you didn't stay, you went up for the march overnight and then marched and then came back. How did you feel when you were getting back on the bus?
okay, well, getting back on the bus was a nightmare. So I told you we got there, we were late, we had to walk the metro, right? But we got to come back on the metro. And one of the questions was about how the people treated us there. All the metro people were amazing. I don't know if you saw it, but the district did not vote for Trump, okay? At all. And the employees of the metro, they were clearly at the march with us in spirit. They were like thrilled, and they were so nice and so enthusiastic, even as it was like a massive logistical nightmare, and there was nowhere for us to be. We were dropping trash everywhere. The feeling I got was very supported from the people there. But we had come in the morning, we didn't know where we were, we walked, right? And I told you, I basically got us lost before we found our way. So then we're coming back, and there were like oceans of buses. There were like 6 parking lots, one of which was like a mile from the other parking lot. So they said, where was your bus, which lot? We didn't know.
Yeah.
Nobody paid any attention. So it's dark, so everything looks different. We had come back on the metro, so we'd come back a different way than we left. And you can't see anything, and then anxiety, right? Like, so I have to worst case scenario it out. Like, okay, so we don't find our bus, we don't get back. I got credit cards, I make my own money. We get a hotel, we go talk to a cop, we get a hotel. It's gonna be okay. Yeah. Sarah's like, what are you saying? We're gonna find our bus. What is the matter with you? Right? But she was no help. She had made no attempt to remember where our bus was. Okay. Like, none whatsoever. So I was fucking on my own.
She's still hot?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fine. Everything's fine. And I'm like, it's not fine. Well, it was fine, so that sucked. Because it was good we were fine, but also that she won. That was super annoying.
Yeah.
So we knew the company we'd been with, so I asked somebody, we came on one of these buses, do you know where they are? And they did, thank God.
Oh, yeah.
So we could go
So
not
they
a
grouped
mile
them
away.
by company?
Yeah.
Oh, smart, okay.
Yeah. So we get down there and we walked the wrong direction some distance, but then eventually we're like, wait, I think if we turn left here, those are our buses. Our bus was facing this way. So like, we found it. It was like, praise Jesus, we get
So
to go
stressful.
home. It was so stressful.
Was the bus going to leave at a certain time
yeah,
and you were
absolutely.
like closing in on that time?
Oh yeah.
Oh, my God.
Oh no, absolutely. We made it with plenty of time, we were told, but I was freaking out.
Oh, yeah.
Like full on. It was I can't communicate how dark it was, how many people there were, how many buses there were, and then they're like, are you in lot number 1 through 3, which is to the left, not lot number like 4 through 6, which is to the right, or 7 and 8, which is like under this bridge a mile away? That is a good question. It feels like someone should know the answer to that question if they want to get back on their bus. I do not know.
Yeah.
And then I felt like such an incompetent adult. Like, what kind of grown-ass woman comes to March and doesn't even remember where they parked? It was fine. We made it back. It was fine. But the joy that I had for getting back on the bus was mainly about finding the bus.
Oh, yeah. Thank God we're going home. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So that sense of success may have been because you found the bus, not from
Yeah.
successfully marching.
But then as everybody came back on and everyone was sharing what they saw from where they were
Yeah.
and how they felt about it, we did feel like we stood up. And so what I felt about marches afterwards was really different than I had before, which is that it just makes you feel more capable of being brave because you've established that you're not the only one who feels this way.
Yeah, because you said before that, you sort of like, well, what do marches do?
Yeah.
And now being not alone, and you've actually mentioned several times in this talk about finding the people that are like you and thinking that you're the only one or one of just a handful of people, and you realize 350 progressive women in middle Georgia,
Right.
that and looking around, you wouldn't necessarily know that they were
we
there.
were all convinced we were the only one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting, weird silver lining
Yeah.
thing, which I don't feel comfortable with because I know that there's actual lives that have been lost by virtue of the Trump presidency. But you can't unring that bell. I can't make that not be true. I don't have magic slippers,
Yeah.
And I do think it has made more people more willing to say what they believe and to not try to pass.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Passes like whatever
You might think I am.
somebody might want you to be.
Yeah.
Has it changed? How has going to the march affected what you have done since then? Has it emboldened you to do more things?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was already happening with the group that we started in September prior to the election. So I think I do think Pantsuit Nation and even Trump's candidacy and the fact that the things that he didn't disqualify him for the presidency, in the election, right? The audio, the making fun of the disabled reporter, it was just over and over and over again. And I knew his history with his ex-wives, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that he raped Ivana
Yeah.
while they were married, right? So that was already doing something to me, just the fact that he was a viable candidate and that I had so many people that I was related to who were perfectly willing to overlook basically my humanity and the humanity of many others in order to get a pro-life Supreme Court justice, right? That was everything was fine. That was already changing me. So then I think going to the march was more of an outcome of that change.
Yeah.
And then the participation in the march was more of that affirmation of not being alone, but it had already started, as you said, with the other group. And so I did change my Facebook account so that it is my Yahoo email and not my Georgia College email. Because when Facebook first started, you had to have a .edu email address, and I'm an old timer, so I've been on there since that thing, and now that's not true anymore. I had never made that adjustment, and my Facebook self had sort of been my Georgia College self, and there wasn't a lot of differences.
Professional,
So I changed that, so that it was me speaking for myself and not institutionally. And I've become involved with a group that's officially affiliated with the Democratic Party, and it's not a secret anymore.
Yeah.
I don't keep it a secret. And we're doing a lot of community work and finding that to be very frustrating and difficult and
Yeah.
challenging. But we've got an event on Monday where we're going to bring in a couple of poli-sci professors, one the former mayor of Columbus, the president of the Georgia Federation of Democratic Women, to talk about how to make your local government work for you, because we're all frustrated in Baldwin County because we can't seem to get them to work for us.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is all part and parcel of this sort of political identity transformation which has happened since 2016.
Yeah. And local politics, it's interesting that you talk about the focus on local politics, that that's where you're choosing to get involved now.
Yeah.
Why that versus, because the march was really a federal, I understand you said you were marching for something, but honestly, it was a response to a federal, election. So what made you why the focus on local? Yeah.
I think just really looking at it critically, doing some reading about most of the stuff that matters the most in your day-to-day life, those are decisions being made at the local level.
Yeah.
And doing a little reading on the Tea Party and its sort of transformation, and what they did was start by taking over local governments and then state legislatures and then the governor's office and then so if we're going to resist the Tea Party, which I do think that's ultimately it is a set of beliefs that suggests there's only one way to be an American, and that a market is always right, and we want to exclude these people from participation in our civic life.
Yeah.
I'm against those things. That's definitely not my beliefs, and those people are elected to office in Baldwin County, Georgia. They got themselves elected. They were organized. I think Obama, with our focus on the federal level, lulled us, many of us, into, it's not perfect, but it's better.
Yeah.
Right, so it's fine, because honestly, local government sucks.
Oh, yeah.
People are awful. Ugh, talk about whiskey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reflects the people who go out to vote in local elections, which honestly it's not everyone.
Yeah.
Very few people.
They're
voted.
pretty fired up.
Yeah.
And they would like to talk to you for 3.5 hours about the fact that the pothole right in front of their house has not been fixed. And you're like, that is not my job, but oh my God. And you have to sit there and have your face not say, I think you're the dumbest person you've ever lived. So that is exhausting. So you can see why we would want to abdicate our responsibility to participate, but we've done so at a serious cost.
Yeah.
I think many of us across communities across the country.
Well, do you think since 2016 local politics have changed, like based on the momentum?
Yes.
Is any of the momentum change?
Yeah, we have the first African-American mayor of Milledgeville, Mary Copeland.
Oh,
She was
that's
elected by 4 votes.
Oh, wow.
And the Middle Georgia Progressive Women helped. Maybe we didn't get all 4 of those votes, but I think we got at least 1 or 2. And that was from, I knew the guy who was the mayor before, and he's a decent dude, but he's no critical thinking, and he is very exclusive in terms of his politics. He defines, in the last mayoral election, he defined the kids at Oak Hill Middle School, where my son goes, which is a public middle school, as like hoodlums and thugs, and just awful and not accurate. And I don't think I always felt like he was sort of like George Bush, like he didn't really want to run, they made him run.
Yeah.
The power structure in Baldwin County was like, we have to maintain control, you need to be our figurehead, no one else can do it, so just do it. And I don't think he ever really wanted to be mayor.
Yeah.
But they did absolutely assume that he would just get reelected. And instead, it wasn't me, it was somebody else in local politics who's also gotten fired up. She went out, she was like, I will find someone to run against him.
Yeah.
And we did, and she's great. She drives a bus route for the school every morning. And then she's the mayor of Milledgeville. And she's, I don't agree with her on everything, right?
Yeah.
But she really cares about this community.
Yeah.
And she's really engaged in an authentic way.
Uh-huh.
And so that felt like, we'll do this thing. Now, I did campaign for Abrams, and I've never been more excited about a candidate in my life. I saw her speak before she had announced that she was running for governor, and one of my former students had said every time he's in the room with her, she's the smartest person in the room. And I have a big ego. I think well of myself. I'm not gonna lie. Stacey Abrams is so much smarter than me. Like, and I have never felt like I got to vote for somebody who I thought was smarter than me because I think well of myself. You know, like Obama, maybe. I feel like I can go head to head.
Wow.
Stacey Abrams, absolutely not. She's brilliant. She always knows all. She's done all the homework and all the reading, and she's so funny and kind. And I have to say, I don't know what to make of it. And I understand why maybe it wouldn't be a good choice, but it's hard to decide to vote for somebody for president once you've seen Abrams. It's like none of you all compare, man. I just want to be able to vote for her. Can't we just have more like her? And she didn't win. We worked so hard, and Kim was so shady. And like, I do think, and Teresa Tomlinson, who is the former mayor of Columbus, who's coming for our event on Monday, she did say at one kind of debriefing after the governor's race, if Kemp pays attention, if he's a savvy politician, he will see how close that was and know that he needs to govern from the center. And I think that that's what he's doing to a certain extent, which is good, right? For the state of Georgia. If he's going to be the governor, he needs to not govern as he ran, right? On xenophobic, homophobic, racist bullshit, right? Because the state of Georgia cannot, literally economically, we cannot afford it. We cannot afford it. So please let that be true.
Well, it's kind of like, because when you mentioned that, the Abrams Kemp thing, because, a lot has happened since the March in 2016, and, we're seeing these, cycle of these really exciting races, the John Ossoff, Karen Handel races, so close, and then it's a disappointment. And then the Abrams Kemp, and you think, maybe this time, over the top. And so I wonder how you feel about that in light of sort of this
momentum or whatever.
Yeah, like you have the march, and then you afterwards you're like, oh, that really didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And these cycles, and how do we keep the momentum going?
Yeah.
Yeah. After that,
I think I could be wrong. I'd love to see data on it. I'm sure there's people smarter than me who are studying it. But I think many of us, I don't think I'm the only one who decided to get focused on local.
Yeah.
I think many of us do get excited about these big, high-profile races at the state or the national level. But I think ultimately what we're doing is more in our communities. So I wanted Abrams to win. I was disappointed that she didn't. I definitely think it's connected to our electoral system and massive voter disenfranchisement, which must be addressed. Ultimately, I'm still working on this stuff to make Baldwin County better. So that's not going to change. Her not winning and me seeing that as an evidence of corruption, which does decrease the health of our democracy, I'm still going to work in Baldwin County because this is face-to-face. The local stuff is face-to-face. And on the local stuff, 99% of it we agree on, even if we have different party affiliation, right? Like, we might think about it like, well, but this part won't work. Like we don't have a public swimming pool in Baldwin County. We don't have a public swimming pool in Baldwin County because the Tea Party has been in government, since I don't know when. I mean, it's a continuation of post-Jim Crow massive resistance politics, why we have a segregation academy and they buried like 3 pools, and it's because white people were like, we don't want those people to be able to use them, right? But then I'm at the college, and we have to recruit and retain high-quality faculty and staff from around the country, and they come to a place that doesn't even have a public swimming pool, and they're like, why would I want to live here and move my family here? Like, you don't have to like those people. I think something's wrong with you if you don't, to understand that you are also destroying the economic and social viability of our community overall.
Well, yeah, especially when people ask, why is there no swimming pool? And they find out why. Because they're like, oh, that says something about...
a place I want to live,
And how do you fight against that? Because, because it's an uphill battle. I mean, it is. It's a very conservative area. Deeply, where people kind of like, you grew up in a conservative family, and you just don't even realize there's another way until you went to college and these debates with your freshman roommate where you're like, oh, okay, and the door was open, and all of a sudden, 20 years later, you're marching,
totally
and and so how much of that is part of the problem around here that people just don't realize there is another way.
Yeah.
And how much you're working for that.
And what I think is true about my community, and I could be wrong, and I do know power speaks back, so it's not, I'm not trying to be naive, but I think, and maybe particularly in the Real Housewives of Baldwin County, the middle-class white women who are mothers, and that's their primary identity, and they define being feral mom as being a good mom, which I think is problematic, right? Only looking out for your own kids and not thinking holistically about the good of the kids, everybody's kids, right? I think most of those women are decent, and I think in one-on-one conversations, once we get brave enough to have them, at least some of them can be moved to see what's good for my kid is what's good for everybody's kids, ultimately. There's still opportunity hoarding, right? That like, if I make it better for your kid, then my kid might lose, right? I think that's still true, but I don't think that's everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've tried to create space for more of those conversations. And I've tried to be bolder about asserting those things and holding people accountable for the choices that they're making that are ultimately destructive to our community. And to say it, and I think I saw something last week I think is good, is the difference between being nice and being kind. There's a lot of gender socialization in the South about being polite, and you know, it's like all of this Southern hospitality, and I was like, Southern people are just as cruel as Northern people. They just are like really masters of passive aggressiveness, you know, like bless her heart.
Oh yeah.
You know,
And
I mean,
if
that
you
is
don't
some
know
poisonous
it,
stuff, man.
Oh yeah, if you're not familiar with it, you don't recognize it, but if you are, you're like, ooh. Okay.
But there's a lot of pressure to not make trouble, you know, to be nice. And I think that that's not kind, right? Ultimately, you've made nice with somebody who's got their boot on someone else's neck, and you will be accountable for that. That you tried not to make them feel uncomfortable while that person was unsafe in their community. So, I mean, it goes up and down, but I think, and then I guess ultimately it is, what's the alternative to being hopeful? What's the alternative?
Well, yeah, and how do you feel, like now we're 2 years, a little over 2 years out from the march.
Yeah.
You still hopeful? Like, how do you feel since then? Are things better, worse? Are we just treading water?
I mean, it's like you said, I do feel like the quality of candidates available to vote for across the country at every level is improving. I think, God, I don't know. I'm not confident that my perception matches reality, but I do feel this way. That like, even the women who were elected to the House this year, who are pretty fantastic, you know? I mean, you look at Georgia State Legislature, you know, Iowa had some really bad ones. Missouri has them. I'm from Missouri originally. You see these people who are, and they're almost all dudes, bless it. Like, I'm not a gender essentialist, but they are the worst of the dudes that we have available to us. You know, they're good dudes, but they're not running for office either, right? And it's like not smart, you know, and not thinking critically, and not, we do not have the best of ourselves in elected office across the country. But I think we're moving more towards, I think between generational change and global climate change and the impact of that, I think there are more decent people who don't want to do it, who do think it's tough, who are just like, but I have an obligation. That sort of civic obligation, which, while I hate, you know, the kind of legacy families that I think it always animated the Kennedys. That like, this is what you do because you're supposed to do this. And you don't have to like it. It's just the right thing to do. Noblesse
oblige. It's like you have a responsibility to help other people,
which includes running for local office. So I feel that way. You know, how would you operationalize that variable? What is better quality candidates? You know, what would that look like? It'd be a fun conversation to have, right?
Oh yeah, and we'll see what happens. I have a couple of questions, kind of just to circle back, because I know you have someplace to be.
Yeah.
Did you, just about the march, there've been a few marches since the 2017 January one. Have you attended any of the
No,
other
I
ones?
haven't. I know, I'm not a marcher.
Yeah,
And
so.
there's still the bathroom thing. But I have done other things, and the more local stuff.
Okay.
Joining organizations, attending meetings, organizing events, that kind of thing.
So
I feel like I would march again, but I think it's still not going to be my strategy of choice.
yeah.
It's not my go-to. It's in the repertoire, and I no longer dismiss it in the way that I did before. But it's not my. I still wouldn't say that it's the thing I think
Yeah.
is the go-to.
Yeah. Well, it's a tool.
Yeah.
I'll give you that. And are there any final thoughts that you want to share on the march or what's happened since then? Right.
Just being a sociologist, kind of thinking about it long term, I do think that we will look back on 2016 as marking a period shift.
Yeah.
I think as we look back, right, and we see, the civil rights movement and the end of Jim Crow, right, I think that as a race scholar, we talk about post-civil rights era. We call that the colorblind era, the era of colorblind racism, where it became talking about race is what makes you a racist. So we're just supposed to not talk about it because we've changed the laws and everyone's equal and it's fine, right? And then the Obama rhetoric of post-racial America, which was bullshit always, the whole time, right? It has always been bullshit. But I was, in 1976, I was, and my students for sure, were born into this era of colorblindness, which is a particular rhetorical style, which is that you're not supposed to talk about and acknowledge race. Well, Trump violates all of that, right? Which is why there was one speech that Bush did that was such a fascinating juxtaposition, because Bush was just as racist in his policies as Trump is, but Bush was sort of like, you're not supposed to talk about it, you're ruining the game, you have to not say those things out loud. And I do think, and I think this is maybe true for some, particularly white women, that they believed the colorblindness. They believed what their parents told them about judging people by the color, not by the color of their skin, by the content of their character. And then they saw their parents do this. And then I think related to women's rights too, right? Dad says I can be whatever I want, but he voted for a pussy grabber. And they're like, excuse me, wait just a second, right? Like, some of us thought you were telling us the truth and are kind of pissed to find out that it was a lie. Now, I've known it was a lie for a very long time, but not all people in my same social location did.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know what we're going to call it, this sort of post-2016 period.
Yeah.
And I think the Women's March is going to be a part of that. It felt like it then.
Yeah.
That we stood up because standing up was the right thing to do. Not because we imagined that we had all the answers and that we were going to change the world in that moment, but because somebody should say something, and I wanted to be on record as having done it. I wanted my son to look back. I believe we will be held accountable for how we voted in the 2016 election. I believe in 30 years, people will be asked to come into elementary schools and respond to the question of, did you vote for the Russian operative who got put in the White House, or did you resist?
Yeah.
I think those stories are going to be told. And I wanted to make sure I was on the right side of history.
Yeah.
I wanted to be on record. I responded to the request for this interview for that reason, is that I want to be on record of having been there and stood up, even with my bladder.
Which is a very brave thing to do.
It's just a reality.
Is it?
It's very frustrating, but it's a reality.
It is.
And I do feel that way. I do feel like in the long view of history, I don't know what it's going to look like. And obviously it's messy and complicated. But as we just, after 2016, I felt like I wanted to talk to everyone I knew who lived through 1968, and didn't it feel like it was all going to fly apart?
Yeah.
And it didn't, right? But I did have friends who were like, we've lived through worse, it'll be fine. I was like, people died in those times.
Right.
So let's not disrespect.
Yeah.
To imagine that we made it through it is to forget that some people didn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, or minimize how horrible it was, because even if it didn't directly affect you, it affected the community, and
Yeah.
that makes it horrible.
Yeah. So, and I don't want to do that, but I really do believe there's going to be something that we're going to have to make sense of, and 2016 is going to that's going to be the year that marks that shift.
I think you should be part of doing that. Thank you so much for being part of this, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, well, I think it is fun.